Hi guys, today we are going to understand conditional probability. Now for that, let us first revise what probability actually is. Suppose in your school there are 200 students, out of which there are 150 boys and 50 girls. Then what is the probability that a selected student is a girl? So obviously your sample space would be consisting of 200 students, but there are only 50 girls. So the probability that the selected student is a girl would be equal to 50 upon 200, that is 1 upon 4. The same question if asked this way, find the probability that the selected student is a boy, then your answer would be, as there are 150 boys, it would be 150 upon 200, that is 3 upon. Now, the concept conditional probability seems very difficult to most of people. Why is it so? Because we try to incorporate that into the formula. But today we are going to understand the actual concept behind it. Now for that, let us take a very simple example from college of 11th standard. Suppose in 11th standard there are in total 200 students getting admission in your college. So I would write down, in total there are 200 students who have got the admission, out of which there are 100 boys and 100 girls. So I would write down 100 boys and 100 girls. Now in your first year you have to select a language. The options are Marathi, Hindi and French. You cannot opt more than one language. So a few students will opt Marathi, a few will Hindi and a few will opt for French. Now let us concentrate on the number of boys. It is 100. Let me say that around 50 boys opted for Marathi and 30 boys opted for French, and the remaining 20 boys opted for Hindi as their language. Now let us concentrate on 100 girls. Let me say that around 40 girls opted for Marathi and 30 girls opted for Hindi and 30 girls opted for French. Now, the question for conditional probability comes like this. Find the probability that the selected student has selected French as their language, provided that it is a girl. Now, I will write down the question in order to understand it in detail, but let us first name the events. Let me say the event B is such that the selected student is a boy. The event G is such that the selected student is a girl. The event M is such that the selected student has opted for Marathi. Let H be the event such that the selected student has opted for Hindi, and similarly F be the event such that the selected student has opted for French. Now we are not going into the formula in order to understand the conditional probability. What we will be concentrating on is the basic concept of probability. For example, what is the probability of event A? It is number of sample points in A upon number of sample points in sample space. So the formula was number of A upon number of S. In short, it is the favorable outcomes upon total number of outcomes. Now let us go back to the question which I asked. Find the probability that the selected student has opted for Hindi such that it is a boy. Let me take one more question. Find the probability that the selected student has opted for Marathi such that it is a girl. Now, how to go about this? Now, if you think clearly, you know that there is a such that or provided condition. Now, in general, when we calculate probability, how will it look like? It will look like this: total, which is 200, and in the numerator there will be the number of favorable outcomes. So what I am trying to calculate here, let me take the first example. Find the probability that the selected student has opted for, let me say Hindi, provided the student is a girl. Student is a girl. Now, if you think clearly, opted for Hindi provided the student is a girl. It means the student selected is only from girls. So it means there are in total 100 girls. Now whoever the girl would be selected would only come from this 100. But out of these 100 girls, there are 40 girls who have selected Marathi, 30 have selected Hindi and 30 have opted French. So I would say it is 100 in the denominator because the condition is such that the selected student has to be a girl. But now I have said that opted for Hindi. Think out of 100 girls, how many opted for Hindi? It is only 30. So your answer is 30 upon 100. Simple. Now let us take one more example and understand this. Probability is such that the student has opted for Marathi provided the student is a boy. Now you must have guessed that the student selected is a boy. That means your total would be 100 because you will be selecting the student only from the boys and there are in total 100 boys. But out of 100 boys, how many have opted Marathi? So only 50 students or 50 boys have opted Marathi. So you would write down 50 upon 100 is your answer. Let us take one more example. Find the probability that the student selected is a boy. Now student selected is a boy provided or such that the student has opted for Hindi. Now you can see the provided condition over here is that the student has opted for Hindi. So you have to check how many have opted for Hindi in total. So you can see 20 plus 30, 50 have opted for Hindi. Now how does that go? The condition given is provided that the student has opted for Hindi. It means the student selected has to be from Hindi. So your total number of students from which the selection would be done is nothing but 50. So in your denominator it has to come like 50. Now out of 50 students who have opted for Hindi, how many are boys? Now that is so simple. How many are boys? 30 are girls and 20 are boys. It means out of those 50, only 20 are boys. So 20 upon 50 is your answer. Now let us try to correlate these questions with our basic definition of probability. In basic definition of probability, the denominator was number of sample points. Now you would argue that in the denominator it had to be 200 because it is the number of sample points, or total number of students. But over here the condition given is something different. Provided that the student is a girl. It means your sample space has now changed. It is not that the total number of students is there and you have to select the students from that. You have to select the students from girl. That is why total number of girls, which was 100, was your new sample space, or I would call it as virtual sample space. Now opted for Marathi provided that the student is a boy. It means the student will be selected from the boys, not from the girls. So the number of boys becomes your virtual sample space. And over here the virtual sample space, as you can guess right, provided that the student has opted for Hindi. So you will look out for the total number of students who have opted for Hindi, and from that you have to select who are boys. So how many boys were there? 20. That is why it was 20 upon 50. Now that is the understanding part of conditional probability. Let us try to understand and correlate this along with the formula. Now first thing, when you check this 30, how do you check that? First of all, you check opted for Hindi and girl. So how many girls are there? Let us understand. There are 100 girls, right? And opted for Hindi. Out of 100, how many opted for Hindi? 30. So you can say it is the intersection of girls and the set Hindi. So we had two events. Let us see. The one event is girls and the other event is Hindi. So that number 30 in the numerator is actually the intersection of Hindi and the total number of girls, which was 30. Now for us, intersection is nothing but number of G intersection H. Right? So 30 can be written as G intersection H. And I have written number because 30 is the number of G intersection H. Similarly, you can check what is 100. It is nothing but the number of girls. So you would write down number of girls. Right? Let us check the same thing for the second example. What is this 100? That the student is a boy. So in the denominator, it will be number of boys. But what is the numerator? Let us see. Opted for Marathi provided that the student is a boy. So student is a boy, that means this particular event. Opted for Marathi is this particular event. So this intersection, what it is? It is 50. It means it is the intersection of Marathi and boys. So your numerator would look like number of M intersection B. Simple. Now what would it be for the final example? Let us see. What is this 50? Student who have opted for Hindi. So that event is nothing but Hindi. So you would say number of sample points in Hindi. But what about the numerator? Hindi and boys. It is the intersection of Hindi and boys. So what would be? Number of H intersection B. Now the conceptual idea of ours is totally clear from these examples. Now what I would do is I would get rid of these two examples and understand this. So let us understand the representation for conditional probability. As you can see, the question is probability that students has opted for Hindi provided that the student is a girl. Now I had already told you that H represents the event such that student has opted for Hindi. But the necessary condition is that the student should be a girl. Now girl is represented by the event G. So you can say probability of student has opted for Hindi provided that, yes, provided that is represented by stroke. So H stroke G. Now this is the representation of conditional probability. How do you read that? Probability of H stroke G. That means probability that the student has opted for Hindi provided that it is a girl. Now by our representation of this table, we can say that the formula is this. So this is nothing but number of G intersection H upon number of G. Now what I would do is I will divide numerator and denominator both by number of sample points, which is number of G intersection H upon number of sample points upon N of G upon N of S. Now you can see that this is the actual definition of probability. Number of G intersection H upon number of S is nothing but probability of G intersection H, and N of G upon N of S is nothing but probability of G. So you get the formula for conditional probability as probability of H stroke G is nothing but probability of G intersection H upon probability of G. Now earlier we had calculated the probability using the table form or actually understanding the meaning of it. Right now we have derived a formula for the same. Now let us try and calculate it using the formula. So I can say that probability of H stroke G is nothing but what? Number of G intersection H, which is nothing but G H is nothing but 30. So probability of G intersection H is number of G intersection H upon number of S. So that would be 30 upon number of sample points, which is 200, upon probability of G is nothing but N of G upon N of S. N of G is nothing but 100 and N of S is 200. 100 upon 200. So in all you are going to get the answer as 30 upon 100 only. Now what we do is let us try and calculate one example using the direct formula. So the question is, the student has opted for French provided that the student is a girl, and we have to find the probability for that. How may I write down that? Find the probability that the student has opted for French provided that the student is a girl. Now first of all we will calculate it using our observation. So P of F stroke G would be nothing but number of F intersection G upon number of G. Now how simple is that? F intersection G, F intersection G is nothing but 30 and number of G is nothing but 100. So 30 upon 100. That is by observation. Now let us go by the formula which we have derived. P of F intersection G upon P of G. Now what is P of F intersection G? It is nothing but number of F intersection G upon number of S upon number of G upon number of S, which is nothing but 30 upon 200. As you can see, F intersection G is 30 upon 200 and G upon S is nothing but 100 upon 200, which is again giving you the answer as 30 upon 100. So what we have seen is this is the actual formula for conditional probability. Then it has N of S because S is the actual sample space. But if you see this observation formula, what you can see is N of G acts as the virtual sample space. You can do the sum anyhow. This is the conceptual thing and this is the formula thing. So this is how we understand conditional probability using the concepts. Thank you for watching the video, guys.